Okay, this video is books number 21 to 25 of the top 50 health books of all time. I am going to go into a little bit into psychology today, and some people don't like that. Well, too bad, because my attitude is, what profited a man if he has totally normal cholesterol, but his life is messed up because of psychological reasons or because he's been sold into slavery. So these are relevant issues of the current time, so I am going to talk about them. We're going to start out with number 21, though, a book about iron metabolism. Iron metabolism is a subject that doctors don't know. There's very, very few doctors who know about it. I didn't know about this stuff until Dr. Sloop taught me about it. Basically, then I started reading all these books. Randall Lawfer, he was a biochemist at Harvard. He has a book called Iron in the Heart. I didn't see a cover of it. I have it around in this room somewhere. But Iron and Human Disease, that's not the one. You want to get Iron in the Heart. It's a very good book. He's a very good writer, very clever and funny. And that introduces you all the concepts of iron. You can watch all my videos on iron. You don't need to buy any of these books. All I'm saying is these are the books sort of that gave me the foundation for my education. For every book here, I've read at least 5 other ones. And all the ones here, I've read them cover to cover more than once. So I'm just telling you, this is what enabled me to understand a lot of stuff that almost no one knows. So Randall Lawfer, he's the best introduction to iron chemistry. Then this guy, Jim Moon, he sort of summarized all the research papers on iron. And the main thing to get out of it is there's ferrous redox cycling. I'll show you a picture of that in just a little bit. This guy, Ed Weinberg, he wrote a little bit about the relationship between iron and cancer and some other things. So he's good, too. All three of them are good in infections and hepatitis and it turning into cancer, more likely when you're iron overloaded. Okay, Douglas Kelf, the English PhD, Etheresia Pretorius, the South African PhD lady. They did a ton of really good work on iron metabolism and on blood clotting and on amyloidogenic transformation of red blood cells for blood clotting. They've done a lot of good stuff, these two. They're very well-cited researchers. Okay, so where did this iron business start? When I was young, like a lot of people, I thought iron was good for you. Popeye would squeeze a can of spinach and eat it, and they say there's iron in it, and it makes you strong. And then Popeye is able to fight off Big Bluto coming for his woman. Olive oil. Okay, now here's total body iron stores. In men, they start going up as soon as the guy's done growing, like in his 20s in a Western country, because they fortify the food with iron, and also there's a lot of iron in red meat, for example. Women don't tend to start becoming iron overloaded until after menopause. You don't want to be iron overloaded. Most Americans are iron overloaded after those ages described there. It's because iron has a variable valence. It's sort of like a transitional metal that enables it to hand off electrons in the middle of reactions. Here's iron right here. So it's useful in the appropriate location. So here's an example of iron in the center of hemoglobin. And it can interact with oxygen. It's also active in the active site of a lot of enzymes. And it can be very useful in the active site of an enzyme or in the center of hemoglobin, of course. Okay, but here's the problem with iron. If it gets free, it can undergo what is called ferrous redox cycling, where it transitions back and forth. It's a transitional element, meaning it can have a variable valence. Okay, it can become Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus. It can actually have valences other than 2 plus and 3 plus, but these are the most common ones. So when it cycles back and forth from Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus, in that process, it can give off an electron. And when it's giving off an electron, that electron can be used in the Fenton reaction, for example, to produce free radicals, molecules that have an unpaired electron in their outer orbital and they're hyperreactive and they initiate chain reactions that damage a lot of structures, can damage DNA, can damage plasma membranes, can damage organelle membranes. So they're very destructive, and this can become autocatalytic, meaning that a tiny bit of free iron can do a tremendous amount of damage. Okay, and it's also associated with ferroptosis and all that. So you don't want to be iron overloaded. Okay, a little bit more about why you don't want to be iron overloaded and have excess free iron floating around in your blood unbound to anything is that bacteria need it to grow. If you look at an egg, let's say of a chicken egg, has a permeable shell. Bacteria can get through the shell, but they can't get to the egg yolk because there's no iron in the egg white. So what the egg has done is it's sequestering iron, preventing iron from being available in the outer periphery so that the bacteria cannot replicate and grow its way towards the yolk. And it's like a human. A human can't walk 100 miles in the desert because they have no water. All right, so our bodies also sequester iron to prevent bacteria from growing in our blood, for example. So here's normally how we metabolize iron. We absorb it in our duodenum. It comes into our duodenocytes, the enterocytes, the lining gut cells of the duodenum. And then it gets put onto transferrin, which is like a little kayak boat, okay, or a wheelbarrow, whatever. It's got two transport spots, and that transports the iron molecules around the body to where they need to go, especially to the bone marrow, where the iron can be used to make hemoglobin. Okay, it also goes for making the enzymes, some of the enzymes for electron transport of the inner mitochondrial membrane in cells. A lot of iron stored in the liver, intracellular. It's stored in ferritin molecules. These can hold 4,500 molecules of iron at a time. In the end, when red blood cells reach their 120 days, they go to the spleen and they're gobbled up. The spleen is the graveyard for red blood cells. But the point of the matter is iron is kept where it belongs, either going to a red blood cell or going to an enzyme that needs iron. Okay, if iron gets free, and let's say you have free iron in your mitochondria, that can have disastrous events with the Fenton reaction. You can remember Fenton reaction because it starts with Fe. So here's Fe2 plus. Fe are the first two letters of Fenton reaction. Okay, here was a good paper. Oh, this one's by Douglas Kell. I wanted to show you a paper by this other guy who wrote about what do you want. You want to have your serum ferritin between about 30 to 80, because if you can get it down to about 30 to 80, you'll have much less oxidative stress reactions in your blood. So that's kind of what the goal is. That's why I don't donate a whole unit at a time, not even a half a unit, but I'll take off a little bit of iron when ever I go for blood labs. If you have excess free iron in your blood, it also predisposes to clotting. It has a similar effect as bacterial endotoxins, LPS and LTA. It'll deform the shape of red blood cells, it'll deform the shape of ferritin and predispose it to clotting. And it causes these amyloidogenic type clots whereby the secondary protein structure of the fibrinogen is changed from an alpha helix like a cylinder into a beta pleated sheet, flat, so it stacks up like a deck of cards. The deck of cards are flat, so they interact with each other and they can form a big molecule, a big aggregate. The bigger the molecule, an aqueous solution like our blood and our cytoplasm, but let's just talking about blood right now, the more likely it is to precipitate out. And when these precipitate out, that means they clot. They're hard to lyse because they don't have the normal structure of a clot, so they're harder for us to remove. And I think these clots are predisposing people in the setting of iron overload to blood clotting, causing, and I think it's related to microvascular angina and cognitive impairment. That's a long story. We're not going to get into all those details. I made entirely separate videos about amyloid type clotting. Okay, book number 22, The Blue Zones. Here's Dan Buettner, nice guy from National Geographic. Picked out the places where he had the most percentage of centenarians, and he went to these places and studied them, okay? And just so you know, there's some criticism of Dan Buettner. They say, oh, he just picked out places that were nice so he could go on vacation there. Oh, he just picked out places that are in the tropical area, and maybe they're healthy because they get more sunshine and vitamin D. Those are some of the things said against them. But I think the data is pretty darn good. I've been impressed by the Blue Zone stuff. Okay, there's a little bit of fuzziness about it, but it's still pretty good. Loma Linda has the longest lived people ever in the history. That is like women living to be about 89 years of age, men to be about 85 on average in those areas where they were the Loma Linda vegans. Not all the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventists, but the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventist vegans in California. They're pretty healthy in these other areas. Okinawa was like second best, longest lived people back in the day when they ate a lot more sweet potatoes. Some people, back when he first started talking about the blue zones, he used to say they ate 95% plant-based. And in the more recent lectures, he says they eat 90% plant-based. There's nobody who's 100% plant-based in the real world because all populations ate a little bit of meat or some type of animal food. It's a good book. I read it pretty fast. All of them were had close-knit families. I think all of them except for one were pretty religious. So they had good social support. Here was just, some of the stuff. Japan, like Okinawa is like Hawaii is to USA. That's what Okinawa is to Japan. It's a nearby island. As the Japanese go from Japan to Hawaii, they start becoming more westernized and even more westernized when they go to California, and they just start getting fatter and sicker and not living as long. the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventists, they're basically religious vegans. And that's why McDougall worked with that population, and he said they could even live longer than these numbers. The average woman is living to 88.6 years. The vegans of the Seventh-day Adventists, he said, if they had even more healthy habits. And by the way, McDougall said all this stuff about them eating a lot of nuts or being healthy. McDougall says that's not true. He says that industry got involved in the funding of the Adventist research, and he doesn't think the nuts were contributing to their good numbers and health. So that's relevant because there's an incredible amount of money that promotes anything that's a profitable food. So you're always going to have tons of trolls and lots of money saying nuts is good and flax is good and soy is good and olive oil and omega-3s. And I'm telling you, I think that's all nonsense. I don't think the science backs it up once you get the non-industry funded stuff. Okay. Okay, and this isn't from the blue zones, but it's the same sort of thing. Mexican Americans, everybody knows the story by now that's watched my channel. The Tarahumara in northern Mexico kept their old diet, lots of corn and squash and greens, and they're healthy, running 100 miles in 2 days. The Pima eat the Western diet. They're all fat and sick and pathetic. Okay, there's typical Pima going for all the surgeries, got train tracks all over their body. Here's the Tarahumara running 100 miles in 2 days. Same, and the point I've shown is that they're the same. Okay, here's a Yanomamo in South America at the junction of Venezuela and Brazil in the Amazon jungle. And they eat a plant-based diet. They don't add any salt to their food. There's no salt shakers in the jungle. And the point is they don't get any hypertension, zero. I'm just showing this as examples of epidemiology. And the reason why the paleo-keto carnivores always criticize epidemiology is because it proves they're wrong, 1 billion out of 1 billion rice eaters are skinny. And then here's Pekka Puska, Dr. Pekka Puska in Finland, the Karelia project. So basically Finland had very, very high cardiovascular mortality. And so he just was given the task from about 1972 to 1977 to teach them to stop smoking, don't eat less of meat and dairy as much as possible, decrease your sodium. I think they sometimes switched it out for KCL. And also to teach the wives. Wives did most of the cooking, men did a lot of labor. And anyways, once they did that, they had an 84% drop in cardiovascular mortality. The highest you could be is 100%. That's an incredible improvement, okay? The rationing studies also showed something similar from World War I and World War II. Even though people are stressed out during times of rationing, and even some of them refugees, the diet's more important than the psychological stress. They would have dramatic drops in their obesity, diabetes, coronary artery disease, and hypertension. Bryce Wank had also picked up on that data as well. I'm just kind of showing you how powerful epidemiology. Here's the Bantu women typically having about 9 or 10 kids like women used to before all the birth control days. And they would nurse for typically 2-3 years. And the point is they get hardly any calcium intake, but they wouldn't have a problem with osteoporosis. Eating calcium is not the way to prevent osteoporosis. There's no such thing as a calcium deficiency in a normally chosen diet in somebody who's not starving. Okay, here's the story of black people. Okay, in America, blacks got hypertension off the charts. All right, tons and tons of them die from that. And then also, now here's the study. If you go to like 1929, when it was the author's name is Donaldson, Lancet is the journal, 1,800 consecutive admissions, 0 hypertension, not a single patient. Okay, and they also got great athletes in Kenya. The marathon runners, for example, they eat this ugali, tons of this cornmeal. They tend to have average blood pressure even in their 60s, 110/70. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not genetic. It's a diet. Okay, so basically with the low-fat vegan diet, you win everything. American diet, all the high fat, they get a lot of heart attacks. They also get a pretty good amount of diabetes. The East Asian, Japan, Korea, it's because they're smoking and too much sodium, so they get a lot of intracranial atherosclerosis and hypertension and strokes. The South Asian, the people from India with all the high, they eat a significant amount of butter, some of them, but the main thing is the fried food. They get a lot of diabetes and things that go with that. Whereas a low-fat, low-sodium vegan, they don't get any of this stuff. That's why I do it, because you win on everything and there's no bad side effects. Oh, I screwed up with this slide. This slide was supposed to go with iron. And the point about iron is from the Ed Weinberg book. He says, iron's like a fire. It's good to have it where you need it, like in the stove and the furnace, but you don't want it anywhere else or it destroys things. And that's what iron's like in your body. I like the little boats in the water here, the little river. They look like the transfer and transport proteins for iron. Okay, now we're going to talk about Soteria. Now we're moving into psychology, okay? And this is pretty big what I'm about to show you, okay? This guy right here, Lauren Moser, was like the head of psychiatry for the National Institute of Health, and he was sort of in charge of schizophrenia. And he thought that, he saw that people in a residential setting did a lot better. So he had people like in California, I think San Francisco area, they would live in residential housing, and they would have some dorm keepers, but they weren't really like so much psychologists or anything. They were just helpful students that would help them a little bit. But this kept the students more likely to be involved in a job or a social setting where they were interacting with people rather than institutionalized in a mental hospital or being treated with powerful antipsychotics like Haldol, for example. And soteria means deliverance. It's a Greek word for deliverance, deliverance unto freedom, deliverance from madness. And so this is the guy, Lauren Moser. And so here's what's funny about it. His patients that underwent his sort of like social support therapy had dramatically better outcomes. I forget the exact amount. It's in the ballpark of about 85% of them were able to return to society in some form, hold down a job for years, get married, things like that. Okay, versus the ones that were medicated and managed by psychiatrists, it was terrible. I forget the percent that could actually rejoin society. It was really low, like maybe 15% or something. It was terrible. So did they celebrate Moser and give him a big award, nominate him for the Nobel Prize? No, they said, hey, you jerk, you're biased against drugs. He was fired from the National Institutes of Mental Health, and he was sort of demonized and vilified. That's what happens to somebody who makes a true innovation. They get attacked by the profession. And that's why I think psychiatry is largely evil nowadays. And I don't say that loosely. And like I said, my father was a psychiatrist, and he was a good guy, and he did the best he could. But I think looking back retrospectively, he was a little bit mentally weak. He sort of believed what he was told. And it was in his interest to do so. Look, believe what you're told, be a conformist, you make lots of money. Okay, be a contrarian, and you get pushed out. Okay, I'm showing you this. Now, this is book number 24 by Harold Koenig. It's called, Is Religion Good for Your Health? The Effects of Religion on Physical and Mental Health. And there's been tons of study. Anybody who's a member of one of the major religions, they're all healthier, okay? And I think it's sort of like they more have a sense of purpose in their life, meaning in their life. They're often part of a church community, but they're just a lot healthier, and that's been shown over and over. Well, I could have included stuff like the Rosetto effect, meaning like the Italians and their extended families were a lot healthier than people who didn't have that social support system. Okay, but I want to make that point. People in extended in religion, they're a lot healthier. Now I'm going to show you something about psychology, and people get a little annoyed about this. Psychology has a much better reputation than it deserves. In my opinion, America used to be primarily a Christian society, and now it has changed. It's primarily an atheistic Darwinism society, and psychologists are like the priests of atheistic Darwinism. And I mean that as a big insult, because what I have seen of them, I know a lot of them personally, and I've known a lot of them, and some of them are really nice, and some of them are really smart too, and I know a lot of them really mean well. But it's just like a school teacher. The school teachers want to help the kids, but the people who run the public school system, they don't. They don't like children. They hate the children, okay? And I'm going to say the same thing I see in psychology. The individual psychologists, a lot of them really want to help the person, but the system is not designed really to help people. They push a lot of them into psychiatry with all the drugs. The perfect example is Jordan Peterson, telling people that, psychiatric medicines are a good thing. No, they're evil crap that cause chemical lobotomies, all right? And the other thing, too, is they go along for whatever trend comes along, They're told, oh, you got to have pronouns. Okay, here's my pronouns. They just, whatever fad comes along, they just go with it. And they're often used in other settings. You'll see this, the cow, moon, east, will use psychologists. Anybody who doesn't agree with the party, well, then they've got a psychological problem, okay? Put them in a mental house, okay? And I see a lot of evil come out of it. I've known lots of guys who've been divorced, and I can tell you, many of them told me the psychologists really screwed them over. Were trying to pump up their wives to get divorced, to have custody problems, to say bad things about the kids, to say bad things about the father so they could get more money out of him. The woman could get more total custody. The whole thing was sort of evil. It was sort of like these guys would tell me that the psychologist was turning the family against each other so that, the parents would be bad-mouthing each other to the kids, trying to break everything apart rather than bring a family together, okay? The Irish priest, Father Patrick Peyton, said, say the rosary. Rosary keeps families together. The family that prays together stays together. So this book right here is by William Kirk Kilpatrick called Psychological Seduction. And he talks about how psychology is much, much worse than people think it is. And this book over here does essentially the same. So this is sort of like the honorable mention, Psychobabble by Richard Gans. He was a psychologist who then became a priest or a pastor because he saw that psychology was so screwed up, it was basically evil. And right now you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm exaggerating. Why do you say that? And basically, I forget which book said it, but they both said it one way or the other. The psychology of Christianity is better than the psychology of psychology. And the reason is it has a moral foundation. It doesn't change all the time. Now, there's some phonies. The current pope is a phony pope, Antichrist, okay? But real Christianity, like the words of Christ, they don't change. Be nice to each other, forgive each other, try to get along. That what you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. Obey the 10 Commandments, all that stuff. That's all good. I don't care about the dogma, but that kind of stuff is good. If you ever want to learn the apologetics of Christianity, here's the best book, Case for Christ. It's available as a book, an audio book, or a DVD movie. And it's great. It's quick, it's concise, it's brilliant, it's entertaining. In terms of getting psychologically psyched up to be happier and to help you be productive and achieve whatever your goals are, this book, Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy, trust me, it's great. There's videos online. You don't got to buy anything. Just watch the videos, but I'm just letting you know these are the things that pump you up. And so now let's just talk about why do I say that Christianity is good and that psychology is evil. And I'll tell you why I say that. Christianity says man is created in the image of God, therefore he is part divine. And because he's part divine, there's something special about him. He's not like the other animals, and he should be entitled, to free speech, to, some basic rights, some privacy, to own private property, to live his own life. A man's home is a castle, that sort of thing, okay? This is the great painting by Michelangelo, The Creation of Adam. Okay, so that's good. That honors the individual. Whereas atheism, basically, the modern alternative to Christianity in Western societies is atheistic Darwinism. And atheistic Darwinism is the current ruling religion of most Western countries nowadays. And so basically, it says that mankind is nothing different than the other animals. He's just a primate that talks. He's just a talking monkey. He has no soul. And because he has no soul, there's nothing special about him. He's no different than an animal. And just like animals are owned by the rulers, humans are owned by the rulers. They're not entitled to free speech. They're not entitled to private property. They're not entitled to anything except to shut their mouth and do as they're told, okay? So that's evil, and that's what psychology agrees with. It's part of the establishment that wants to say that mankind is meaningless. His life is meaningless. There's nothing he could do to give his life meaning. He's just a talking monkey. And I'm reminded of the movie Planet of the Apes, and we can see the Statue of Liberty, the beacon of freedom, is sinking. It's going down underwater. It's drowning. And that's what's happening to the USA these days. Okay, and here is the future of mankind if this continues. This is Charlton Heston in the movie Planet of the Apes. Along with the Statue of Liberty, mankind is sinking. Freedom is sinking. And hopefully it's not going to keep getting worse. But here's some quotes of Charlton Heston. Political correctness is just tyranny with masters. I've heard with manners. I've heard another person say political correctness is really just the organization of hatreds. Try to get everybody to hate the opponent of the cow, the moon, the east, and then that opponent can be knocked out of the way. Then the cow, the moon, and the east can then take over and force everyone else into slavery. And that's the game plan, and that's what's happening. So Heston continues. PC is just tyranny with manners. Why is it so powerful on university campuses? Who on campus really believes that professors are allowed to speak freely? I wish for you the courage to be unpopular. Popularity is history's pocket change. Courage is history's real currency. Telling us what to think has evolved into telling us what to say. So telling us what to do can't be far behind. Charlton Heston is not only a great actor, he's a great man. He's probably the greatest actor in the history of the United States. Okay, here is from Soviet Russia. And they burned down 48,000 churches. They killed 65 million Christians. And the priests that weren't killed, they turned them into slaves. Okay, that's what's coming to the USA. Look what happened in Canada last year. Okay, and then people think slavery is something from the past. They also think, oh, it's something that just happened to black people. I got news for you. My ancestors were Irish. They were slaves of the British for about 1,000 years. And now it's even worse. They opened up their shorelines. They flood the country with people who are hostile to Christians. And Ireland is kind of extinct now. And it used to be, even though they were totally abused by the British, and many of them starved to death in the potato famine of, like 1845 to 1848, at least there was some hope. There was a chance to make a comeback. But with what's happening now, I think basically the powers that be have decided, no. We don't want Christianity to have a comeback. We don't want Christianity to ever raise its head again in the world. And so what they're doing is they're flooding these countries with people who are hostile to Christianity so that they can just destroy it once and for all for good. Okay, so here's a lady being sold into slavery. And also, I think women are crazy if they're not against this open, border stuff, okay, because they're the ones, I think, everybody's screwed, but they're screwed even worse. In all these Western countries where they're farther along with this massive immigration, women are scared to leave their houses because there's gangs of men who just beat them up and who RAPE them, and a lot of them, are KI, LL, ED, and it's not safe, okay, that you can't walk down the street anymore, all right? This is a reversion. This is not progress. This is a reversion to third world barbarism, okay? And it is happening in all the Western countries. If you don't believe me, just go to some of the other video sites and watch videos about it. You will see I'm totally understating how bad it is. Okay, and what Christianity also says is that there's always a conflict in the world between good and evil, and it is the duty of a Christian to serve goodness, to be good, to do good things, to help other people, and hopefully create a ripple effect that spreads outward where you're nice to somebody, then they're nice to somebody else, and everybody ends up being better off. That's what you want in a good society. That's why traditionally everybody wants to move to a Christian society. And here's really where we're at. We're either going to right now we're actually about halfway down this path, and unfortunately it's getting almost close to inevitable that this is going to happen. This is the great set, and that's the goal of a 95% reduction in population, which means there's not going to be a lot of musical chairs, so most of us won't be around for that, unfortunately. And so what we would be better off doing if we could get back on this road and sort of realize you don't know what you got till it's gone, okay? The traditional United States sort of Christian value society, Bible-based society, you could walk freely down the street. You could have a conversation. Like I said, I think the 80s is the best. I'm 60 years old. I think the 1980s was the best decade. I remember all the movies in Hollywood were great. I used to love going to the movies. The comedians on TV were funny. I got along with people from all the different ethnic groups. I remember that as just being a great decade. I remember, too, when Ronald Reagan was the mayor, the governor of California. It was rich. A lot of people go to the public colleges for free. That's how rich it was. Nowadays, because everything's so mismanaged, we're in terrible poverty. Okay, and then here's the plan of the controllers. The controllers want this open as much as possible. They call this the broom, as part of the set, as a way to sweep away Christianity, sweep away all these annoying Americans who expect to have things like free, speech, and they want to have their own property. How ridiculous is that? They want privacy. How ridiculous is that? No. Talking monkeys don't get privacy. Talking monkeys are on display in their cage every day, and they do as they're told. They shut up or will sell their kidneys, okay? That's what's coming. It's already happening, all right? So, I wish people understood this. To me, it's so obvious. So here's a painting by McNaughton. He's a great artist, and he's showing people, he says, why don't you just, awake and remove your chains, okay? I love the song by Tasha Cobbs. Tasha Cobbs is this black lady gospel singer, and she sings a song called Break Every Chain. And Christianity is the only thing that could do it. It's the only thing that can do it. And if you don't understand that, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. You know, we're having a Hollingsworth gap here, okay? But I'm just telling you, it's the only thing that could do it. The word religion means relegati, legati, to ligate, to tie together. And the people need something to tie them together. And if they're not willing to be tied together by religion, then the ruler comes in and ties them together by force. And that's what's happening nowadays, and it's only going to get worse. So here is Jesus Christou, and here's with this young gentleman pointing to the Constitution, where it says that we have all these rights, including free speech, okay? The Declaration, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Jesus Christou and the morals of the public are what makes it possible to live with very few rules. If you've got good internal morals for the individual people and their attitude towards each other in society, you don't need a bunch of laws and rules. But if you don't have it, then you need endless rules, and even that won't be enough. Okay, here's a painting by Schenck. I think it was Augustus Schenck, and basically this is kind of the USA. The sheep are in desperation. They're encircled by wolves. They got some doggies to protect them a little bit, but that's not going to be enough. The dogs can only hold off the wolves for a little while. Their only hope is to rally to the cross with the shepherd, and if they do that, they've got a chance. Okay, if they don't, they're screwed. And right now, when you hear somebody say diversity is our strength, that's a joke by the big power brokers. Okay, what they mean is a divided public is their strength for turning them all into slaves and reducing their numbers. Okay, that's what it really means. It used to be when I was growing up, America's slogan was E pluribus unum. E pluribus unum means out of many one. Out of many one. And, you know, they say America was a melting pot. Everybody comes here, becomes an American. Teddy Roosevelt said, you know, 100 years ago, there are no hyphenated Americans. GW, when he saved America, you know, he'd pray every day. Okay, here's typical America painting. GW praying. This painting is by Arnold Freiberg. He's a great artist. He also did a lot of stuff for the Mormons. Okay, here is our original lawmakers. They're all praying in the same buildings where they did their jobs. They would have mass, okay, every weekend. They would say a prayer before every session that they opened. This was normal. Lots of pastors were involved. Pastors used to speak freely. Now that they got them in these nonprofit corporations, 503 status, they're all intellectually castrated and not allowed to say anything, or they lose their tax-exempt status. And so that was done. And that was done largely by, what's his name, in the 1960s, the guy who followed JFK. And what a scumbag he was. And basically, it castrated the entire church. Now nobody can say anything. Okay, here's just another painting. Same old thing. You know, our founding fathers, they would say their prayers in the same area where they would do their work, where they would meet together. This was all normal. And that's back when America was a strong moral country. Okay, here's Father Patrick Peyton, the great Irish priest, and he would speak in front of rallies. In the Philippines, he had over 1 million people at his rosary rally. And in the United States, he would routinely fill entire football stadiums. Okay, that's back when America was more overtly Christian. And as Christianity fades away, freedom fades away too. It's rather obvious if you've read history. If you haven't read history, then you don't understand. Okay, and so here's Jesus Christou. He's the one that can unify everybody. Everybody can respect a guy who gave his life to help other people, okay, and who told everybody to be nice to each other. You know, I could care less about the subtle differences between all the different sects. I could care less. But the basic stuff that he said, be nice to each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, help each other, that which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. And I like what Ayn Rand said. Ayn Rand said, if you give individual rights, individuals are the smallest minority, then everyone has their rights guaranteed. Okay? This is another painting by McNaughton. He's a great artist. Okay, so Christianity acknowledges the fact there is evil in the world and goodness fights evil. It's just a fact. And if anybody thinks there isn't a lot of evil in the world, then they have not been following current events. They haven't read history. Okay, so I kind of like this is kind of funny that at first they're fighting in one way. Now they're kind of getting ready to wrestle. They look like they're doing martial arts here. And then here they are having an arm wrestling match between Jesus Christou and Diablo, okay? And we pray that Jesus Christou wins, but we don't know. He's been losing a lot of ground lately. And, hopefully Jesus Christou will save the day, but who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? And this is more of the same thing, you know. It's kind of like the battle in heaven. Okay, that's one thing that was talked about. There was the old original, the war in heaven with Satan was the fallen angel and, you know, Michael and the other angels versus the fallen angels. Okay, and then here's just a picture. This is what America was like when I was growing up, okay? When I was growing up, all my friends' moms, except for one, were married, and they didn't work. Okay, only the divorced lady worked, and that was where all the parties were because they were divorced, so you could go to that house and you could bring girls there. Okay, Spirit of Christmas. You know, we used to skate on the ice at the park. You just would go to the park. Your parents didn't even think about it. You know, I would be like in third grade, and I'd go to the park by myself to go ice skating. You didn't think about it. Nowadays, it wouldn't be safe to do that. The Christmas lights are everywhere. Christmas are the light of the world. Look how beautiful they make everything in the wintertime. Without that, it's just bleak, cold, and dark winter with no sunshine. It's beautiful, and it was great. And we were all happy, and we had a lot of fun, and it really was great, and we loved it. Okay, this is painted by Thomas Kincaid. This guy sold more paintings than any artist in the history of the world. I love all these paintings. I have a couple of his books. They remind me of my childhood. Oh, and this is one more painting of Jesus Christ from Quo Vadis. Quo Vadis, where, you know, St. Peter was leaving Rome, fleeing because of the persecution of the Christians by Nero. And he saw Christ walking towards Rome with the cross on his shoulder. He said, Quo vadis Domine, where are you going, Lord? And the Lord said, I'm going back to Rome because you have turned your back on our people. You have abandoned them. So I'm going to go to Rome and be crucified again. Then St. Peter said, oh, no, I'm sorry, God. I'll go back to Rome. Okay, and here's Thomas Aquinas. I love Thomas Aquinas, who sort of showed that faith and reason go together, which is obviously true when you think about it in detail. Okay, this is just showing some of the differences. When you got Christianity, you get beautiful literature. You get books like Brothers Karamazov, like Quo Vadis. These are some of the top 5 novels of all time. You get masterpieces, Les Miserables, the music, the movies, everything that goes with it, the art that goes with it. It's beautiful. When you go for atheistic Darwinism, you end up with this nonsense. You got modern art museums, they have statues of turds. That's an insult to humanity, an insult to mankind. This is what I meant by atheistic Darwinism degrades everything in a society. With Christianity, you get art like Michelangelo's Pietà, the most magnificent sculpture ever. Look at Bernini's statue of Christ. It's magnificent. With Christianity, you get buildings like Amiens Cathedral, you know, and Chartres and Notre Dame and all these other ones all over the Western world. They're magnificent. They're the best buildings, the most beautiful buildings ever made. With atheistic Darwinism, what do you get? You get a skyscraper that looks like a bunch of animal cages with a statue of a turd in front, as Tom Wolfe would say. I mean, it's crap. That's what you get. And it's only going to get worse. And here's Picasso. Picasso's called a great artist in the modern world because Picasso's a piece of crap. He's a cow, you know what, moon, you know what, east, okay? And his paintings stink. Look at that. Who would want that on their wall? It's disgusting. It's annoying. It's an insult. Okay, now here's how Christians paint. This is Edmund Layton, you know, one of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood disciple proteges. You know, a young guy in the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, which was started by John Everett Millay around 1850, promoted by John Ruskin. There's tons of magnificent painting. You know, there's like so many magnificent paintings like this. It's not even funny. If you study the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, you'd be amazed. They were awesome. Like probably the best painters of the 1800s. They were magnificent. Part of the Victorian Renaissance and the Catholic revival of the 1800s. It's just beautiful. Okay. And oh, by the way, I made a book about Christian art, and the reason I did it because I love Christian art, but also to try to educate. I see all these young people, and man, they're just barbarians. You know, they don't read anything. The average American doesn't read a single book after freshman year of high school. It turns them off from reading. And they don't even know what's out there. They don't even know how superior Christianity is to all other cultures. There is no non-Christian culture that I'm aware of that's even 1% as good as Christianity at painting, at art, at literature. They're just not, okay? Because Christianity gets it right for metaphysics. It says we're created in the image of God, therefore we can be a creator too. There's a lot of other religions who say, oh, any type of painting of a religious figure is idolatry, therefore they won't paint anything that's semi-religious even, okay? There's other ones, they don't even paint at all. I'm sorry, but painting's a great thing. Drawing is a great thing. And the Christian music, it all goes with it. And the whole purpose of it initially was to train all the illiterate people into the Christian story. And it just kept growing because the artists would compete, for example, in the Renaissance, who could make the best paintings. And they made so much great stuff. Okay, here's, in Christmas season, the Christians put lights up on all the houses. They're beautiful. That's what I mean by Christians are the light of the world. Instead of a bleak, cold winter that looks like this crap over here, it looks like this. And it becomes the nicest holiday of the whole year. So they take a sad situation and they make it happy. That's beautiful. This is another painting by McNaughton, and here's people going around singing Christmas carols. I used to do that when I was young. It was the thing to do, and everybody liked it. You would knock on all these people's doors, and a lot of them you would know them or you wouldn't know them. Back when I was young, we knew most people because everybody had kids practically. When I was a kid, I didn't have to have my parents arrange a play date. I would walk down the street. There was a bunch of kids on my block. There were a bunch of kids on a block away from me, and we would all play games, kickball or softball or whatever. There were lots of kids around. Nowadays, everybody's only got 1.5 children, and for a kid to find a friend, you got to drive them halfway across town to find a friend for them, okay? It's screwed up, all right? And all these women, think that their job is more important than their family, and then they get a little older and like, uh-oh, I was wrong. My family's more important than my job, and then they're sad because they forgot to have kids, a lot of them. Okay, here's just Charles Dickens. He wrote lots of great books. My favorite is Christmas Carol. And then the other ones are magnificent too. It's David Copperfield, Tale of Two Cities, etc. And his only worst book is Great Expectations, and that's the one they make kids read, Great Expectoration. So here's Christmas Carol. It's the greatest novel ever written. Real short. You can read it on a weekend. And here's the family. And once Scrooge became good again, he donated money that helped save the life of Tiny Tim. And it's a beautiful story, and everybody's happy. And here is just, a great version of the movie is George C. Scott. I should have got the copy of Scrooge with Bill Murray. That's a great comedic version of it. And what I'm trying to say is, what does atheistic Darwinism have to offer for culture? Drag queen story hour? What kind of nonsense is this? Do you want some guy with a hairy chest and a beard going into your kid's grade school, sitting next to your little kid with this nonsense? This is ridiculous. This other guy with a beard here? This is not normal. This is the big controllers making fun of America, okay? This is not appropriate for young children. Is this guy going to teach your kids? There's another reason why kids are better off being homeschooled. This is the kind of crazy stuff that's happening in public schools. And then they'll try to get your kid to say, oh, gee, don't you think it would be fun to be a girl? Do you think maybe you should be a girl? Oh, he said yes. Time to castrate them. It's insane. This is so insane, it's not even funny. You know that the big controllers who are trying to turn the United States into a gynocracy and turn all the men into soy boys, they're loving it because they know that this is the end of Christendom. This is the end of Christendom when all the men become soy boys and they send their kids off to drag queen story hour and they say, oh, sure, castrate them. Why not? Who cares? It's insane. It's so crazy. It's not even funny. And everybody's scared to talk about it because then you'll get named a bad word. Oh, if you say we should close a you-know-what down south, the you-know-what border, oh, then you're xenophobic or you're racist or something. I got news for you. I'm half Hispanic, okay? And none of my Hispanic friends want an open you-know-what border. That's all BS. That's a trick being used by the cow, you-know-what, moon, you-know-what, east to open up the you-know-what border so these countries can be ruined and destroyed. That's what that's all about. Okay, and then, what should a good Christian do? A good Christian should protect people. So, like, here's this poor man, and these evil men are going to, hang him from a tree, okay, like this poor guy over here. And here's the guy's wife and kids saying, oh, please leave him alone. And the priests and the monks are protecting him, and that's what they should do. This is called the right of asylum, all right, the painter's amigo. And that's what people should do. But instead, what you see, quite often, most people will conform and do whatever they're told by authority, and they'll be the ones like this guy ready to throw a rope around somebody's neck, okay? That's evil, okay? Now, I don't know the whole story behind it. Here it is, Asylum, and the name of the painting is Right of Asylum. But I'm just showing you, you're going to have a choice someday, you in the audience, to either do right or not do right by some poor random individual, and you should do right by them, okay? And Christianity tells you what the right things to do. Be good, be kind, be thoughtful, okay? Help the other people. Whereas conformity and atheistic Darwinism says, throw that rope around his neck and string him up, okay? That's why you need Christian ethics. Christianity produces movies like this, a masterpiece. It's a Wonderful Life. What a beautiful movie about family happiness. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's just magnificent. Everything is right. It's all about the people, their relationship, their feelings. It's beautiful. That's what a movie should be like. Okay, the other thing was Masculinity. when I was a young guy, these were our heroes, the Schultz brothers. You know, world and Olympic champion, world and Olympic champion. Shows on TV where father knows best. Nowadays, they would say this is toxic masculinity, and this show is too patriarchal. They make fun, you know, who's the main male on TV? Homer Simpson. And they make fun of him as just being a stupid moron. And there's all this stuff about soy boys. All these men are so feminized, you know, wearing, you know, all kinds of like little trinkets and bracelets like women. You know, they got their ears pierced like women. Their gestures, their voice, this is becoming normal. And I think part of it is that they're being, in a sense, poisoned. There's so much estrogenic chemicals in the food, in the detergents, in the clothing, in the personal care products. It's in the water. It's way more common than people think, and I think it's feminizing men, and it's making them, especially the young ones, confused about their masculinity, if they're a boy or not, and then they castrate them. It's a evil. It's being done intentionally, I think, by the controllers. Okay, and then there's the idea of trying to pretend that women are the same as men. No, women have small upper body strength because it wasn't feasible. In the past, they always worried about starving to death. So it would be a waste of biologic energy to give women a big muscular upper body. Their job was to have babies and to take care of the babies until the children hit puberty, and then they would go off with the men. So they didn't need to be stronger than a boy until he hits. They just had to be strong enough to control their sons until the boys hit puberty. Then they send them off with the men to do whatever the men do. You know, go grow crops, hunter and gatherer, and whatever the men do. Okay, and the women would tend to have about 10 children, nurse them for about 3 years, 4 years, and they would hang around with each other, gather food in the daytime, and take care of the children. If they weren't nursing a kid, they would then, you know, be pregnant again within a year. And that's just how society has been for many thousands of years. Okay, and so this is the Sabines. This is the founding of Rome. The men who sort of helped found Rome initially wanted more women, so they tricked this population called the Sabines, and they just took their women and abducted them. And it's kind of a brutal story. But what I'm trying to say is that's kind of the way things have been in history for a long time. It's not right, it's not nice, it's not pretty, but that's what happens. So what I'm trying to say is the idea that women are going to save the country on their own without men helping them, that's not realistic. Okay, and then this is sort of what the big controllers want now. They want this to happen. They want the country to be overrun by having an open you-know-what down south, you-know-what border. And they want the whole place to be destroyed in a chaos like this. And they don't want any religion. They want themselves to be the equivalent of gods. And then they're just going to come in and impose their control over it whatever way they want. And it's not going to be very nice. Anyways, okay, so I realized that was a lot of stuff, and I kind of got off the track of health and nutrition a little bit, but it's relevant because if we don't maintain our right to, you know, have a free speech conversation, you know, we're going to lose most things. We're sort of being pushed into this. And so in my next set of books, I'll get back to the regular health and nutrition stuff, but I thought it was relevant for you to see this because I see psychology as going down this slippery slope path. And the psychologists pretend to be objective and scientific, but they're not at all. They're breaking up families. They're pushing towards the destruction of the traditional family, heterosexual father and mother, parent and their child. They're taking children away from the parents by, you know, they're doing all kinds of things to remove the control of the parents over the child, like allowing the child to consent for medical stuff without the parents being involved when they're a minor. It's all insane. So anyways, that's it for today. I hope that was useful to you.